Rumpelstiltskin, a classic fairy tale, read by Beverly Chen. Welcome to Thimbleberry Stories, where warm and cozy tales await you. If you love gentle bedtime stories that make you feel as sweet and warm as a meadow full of wildflowers, be sure to like and subscribe so you never miss a new adventure. Now, get comfy, pull up your favorite blanket, and let's begin tonight's story. Once upon a time, in a kingdom bordered by golden fields and shadowy forests, there lived a humble miller and his daughter, Elise. She was a bright and kind-hearted girl with a beautiful laugh and eyes full of curiosity. She often wandered through the meadows, collecting wildflowers, and whenever she had time, she would go to the royal gardens, where she sometimes caught glimpses of the young prince, Adrian. Though she was only the daughter of a miller and he a prince, fate had a way of bringing them together. As children, they met by chance, Adrian sneaking away from his tutors and Elise picking apples from the orchard near the castle. He had helped her reach a particularly high branch, and from then on, they shared stolen moments of friendship, talking about dreams beyond the castle walls. But as they grew older, they drifted apart. The prince had duties to fulfill, and Elise knew her place. She was just a miller's daughter after all. One day, Elise's father, eager to impress the king, made a foolish boast. "Your Majesty," he said, bowing low, "my daughter is so gifted, she can spin straw into gold." The king, intrigued by this claim, summoned Elise to the castle that very night. She was led to a grand chamber filled with mounds of straw and a single spinning wheel. "If you truly have this gift," the king said, "prove it by morning. If you succeed, you shall be richly rewarded. If you fail, well, I have no use for liars." Tears filled Elise's eyes as the heavy door locked behind her. She had no idea how to spin straw into gold. She buried her face in her hands, knowing she would never see the sunrise again. Then, from the shadows, came a voice. "Why do you weep?" Startled, Elise looked up and saw a strange little man standing before her. He was no taller than a child, with a sharp, pointed nose and eyes that gleamed like moonlight on water. His clothes were made of dark silk embroidered with golden threads, and he carried a twisted wooden cane. "If I do this for you," he said, "what will you give me?" Elise had nothing but the necklace her mother had given her, a delicate chain with a tiny pearl. Trembling, she held it out. The little man took it, then climbed onto the stool by the spinning wheel. With a flick of his fingers, the wheel began to turn, and thread by thread, the straw transformed into shimmering gold. By morning, the chamber glittered, and when the king saw it, his eyes filled with greed. But instead of releasing Elise, he led her to another room, even grander, filled with twice as much straw. "One more night," he said, "and I will grant you an even greater reward." Again, Elise despaired, and again the little man appeared. "What will you give me this time?" She gave him the silver ring from her finger, the only jewelry she had left. Pleased with the trade, he spun the straw into gold once more. On the third night, the king led her to the grandest chamber yet, filled from floor to ceiling with straw. "If you can spin all this into gold, you shall marry my son, Prince Adrian." Elise gasped. Adrian? He was the boy she had once known, the boy she had secretly dreamed of. She could not let this slip through her fingers. But when the little man appeared, she had nothing left to give. He grinned. "Then promise me this. When you become queen, you shall give me your firstborn child." Her heart pounded. It was a terrible promise, but she had no other choice. With a whisper, she agreed. By morning, the last straw was spun into gold, and true to his word, the king announced Elise's engagement to Prince Adrian. To her surprise, Adrian was overjoyed. He remembered her from long ago, the girl with wildflowers in her hair and laughter in her voice. "I had hoped to find you again," he confessed. Elise blushed, but in her heart, she still feared the promise she had made. In time, Elise and Adrian were married, and though it had been a marriage of arrangement, love blossomed between them. She learned that Adrian was not the spoiled prince she had feared, but a kind and thoughtful man. He listened when she spoke, he made her laugh, and in his eyes, she saw not just admiration, but true affection. Years passed, and the memory of the little man faded. Elise had everything she had ever wanted: her husband, a beautiful home, and peace. Then one autumn evening, Elise gave birth to a son, a child with bright, curious eyes. She and Adrian were filled with joy, and the kingdom celebrated the birth of its prince. But on the third night, as she held her baby close, a cold wind swept through the room. The fire dimmed, and from the shadows stepped the little man. "I have come for what you promised me," he said with a grin. Tears filled Elise's eyes as she clutched her child. "Please," she begged, "I will give you all the gold in the kingdom, but not my son." The little man frowned, rubbing his beard. "Very well," he said. "I shall give you 3 days. If you can guess my name, the child will be yours to keep." That night, with her heart heavy, Elise told Adrian everything. She confessed her secret, the deal she had made long ago. Adrian's face darkened, but instead of blaming her, he took her hands in his own. "We will not lose our son," he vowed. "I will send messengers across the land. We will learn his name." For 3 days and nights, messengers rode to every village and every kingdom, seeking out names old and new. Elise tried every name she could think of, but each time, the little man shook his head. Then, on the final night, one messenger returned with a strange tale. He had ventured deep into the blackened mountains where a hidden kingdom lay. There, in a dark castle with golden spires, he had seen the little man dancing before a fire, chanting, "Tonight, tonight my plans I weave. Tomorrow's child I shall receive. The queen has lost, she'll cry in vain, for Rumpelstiltskin is my name." Armed with this knowledge, Elise and Adrian waited. When the little man appeared, Elise feigned worry. "Is your name Tobias?" she asked. The little man chuckled. "No." "Perhaps Bartholomew?" He smirked. "Wrong again." Elise smiled. "Then it must be Rumpelstiltskin." The little man froze, his face twisted in rage. "Who told you?" he shrieked. He stomped his foot so hard that cracks spread through the stone floor. The castle trembled, and in a flash of fury, he vanished in a whirlwind of golden sparks, never to be seen again. Relief washed over Elise as she cradled her son. She looked at Adrian, tears brimming in her eyes, and he held her close. "You are safe now," he whispered. "We all are." And so Elise and Adrian lived happily, free of fear, bound together not by fate, but by love. The end. And now, dear listener, it's your turn to rest. Close your eyes, snuggle up, and let the stars twinkle just for you. Tomorrow will be a wonderful day, perhaps even an adventure of your own. Good night, little dreamer. Sleep well. Goldilocks and the Three Bears, a classic fairy tale, read by Beverly Chen. Welcome to Thimbleberry Stories, where warm and cozy tales await you. If you love gentle bedtime stories that make you feel as warm and cozy as porridge that's just right, be sure to like and subscribe so you never miss a new adventure. Now, get comfy, pull up your favorite blanket, and let's begin tonight's story. Once upon a time, in a deep green forest where the sunlight danced through the leaves and little birds chirped sweet melodies, there was a cozy cottage nestled among the trees. This was no ordinary cottage. It belonged to a family of 3 bears. There was Papa Bear, who was big and strong with a deep, rumbling voice. He loved taking long morning walks and collecting firewood to keep their home warm. Then there was Mama Bear, who was gentle and kind, always humming as she cooked delicious meals and tended to her garden of bright wild flowers. And finally, there was Little Bear, who was curious and playful, always hopping about, chasing butterflies, and asking endless questions about the world. One morning, as the sun stretched its golden rays over the forest, Mama Bear set 3 bowls of steaming porridge on the wooden table. "Breakfast is ready," she called. Papa Bear and Little Bear hurried over, sniffing the sweet cinnamon-scented porridge. But when they each took a bite, oh dear! "Ow, ow, too hot!" Little Bear fanned his mouth. "My goodness, this needs to cool," said Mama Bear with a chuckle. "Let's take a walk while we wait," Papa Bear suggested. So off they went, strolling through the forest, leaving their porridge to cool. Now, not far from the bear's cottage, a little girl named Goldilocks was walking along a forest path. She had golden hair that bounced when she walked, and bright, curious eyes that always searched for something new to explore. That morning, she had wandered farther than usual, drawn by the scent of wildflowers and the sound of bubbling brooks. As she hopped along, something caught her eye. A little cottage and a garden full of daisies and marigolds. Goldilocks had never seen this house before. She stepped closer and saw the door was slightly open. "Oh, what a lovely little house," she said to herself. "I wonder who lives here." Her curiosity got the best of her, and before she could think twice, she stepped inside. Inside, the cottage was warm and welcoming. The wooden floors creaked softly under her feet, and the scent of cinnamon lingered in the air. Sunlight streamed through lace curtains, casting golden patterns on the cozy furniture. And there, on the table, sat 3 bowls of porridge. Goldilocks' stomach rumbled. She hadn't had breakfast yet, and the porridge smelled delicious. She stepped up to the biggest bowl. "I'll just have a tiny taste," she whispered, taking a spoonful. "Ouch, too hot," she gasped, waving her hand in front of her mouth. She tried the medium-sized bowl next, but when she took a spoonful, she wrinkled her nose. "Too cold." Finally, she tasted the smallest bowl. Just right," she said happily, and ate every last bite. Now that her belly was full, Goldilocks noticed 3 chairs by the stone fireplace. First, she climbed onto the biggest chair. "Oh my, this is too hard," she said, wiggling uncomfortably. She tried the medium-sized chair next, but it was too soft, so squishy that she sank right in. At last, she sat on the smallest chair. "This one is just right," she giggled, kicking her feet happily. But crack! The chair wobbled, creaked, and crash! It broke into pieces, and Goldilocks tumbled onto the floor. "Oh dear," she said, rubbing her elbow. "Maybe I should rest for a bit." She wandered up the wooden staircase and found a cozy little bedroom with 3 beds. First, she climbed into the biggest bed, but it was as firm as a wooden plank. "Oh no, this is too hard." She tried the medium-sized bed, but it was much too soft, like sleeping on a cloud. "This is too fluffy," she sighed. Then she crawled into the smallest bed, pulling the warm patchwork quilt up to her chin. "Ah, just right," she murmured sleepily, and before she knew it, she was fast asleep. Meanwhile, the 3 bears returned home from their walk, chatting about the lovely blue jays they had seen. But as soon as they stepped inside, Papa Bear's deep voice rumbled. "Someone's been eating my porridge." "And someone's been eating mine," said Mama Bear. Little Bear looked at his empty bowl and gasped. "Someone ate all of mine, every single bite." The bears looked around. That's when Papa Bear noticed the chairs. "Someone's been sitting in my chair," he grumbled. "Someone's been sitting in mine too," said Mama Bear. Little Bear looked at his broken chair and cried, "Someone sat in my chair, and they broke it." The bears hurried up the stairs, their furry feet padding across the wooden floor. Papa Bear peered at his bed. "Someone's been sleeping in my bed," he rumbled. "And someone's been in mine too," Mama Bear added. Then Little Bear gasped. "Someone's been sleeping in my bed, and she's still there." Goldilocks stirred and slowly opened her eyes. She blinked. 3 bears were staring down at her. "Oh my!" she yelped, sitting up in shock. She scrambled out of bed, dashed down the stairs, and ran out the door as fast as her little legs could carry her. The 3 bears watched her disappear into the woods. Then Little Bear giggled. "She was kind of funny." "She certainly was," Mama Bear said with a smile, shaking her head. Papa Bear chuckled. "Well, we better fix up that chair and make some fresh porridge." And so, in the warm little cottage deep in the forest, the 3 bears had a new story to tell at dinner time. As for Goldilocks, she never forgot her adventure and always made sure to knock before stepping into someone's home, especially if they happened to be bears. And from that day on, she and Little Bear became the best of friends, sharing stories and adventures. And so the forest remained peaceful, full of laughter, curiosity, and wonderful surprises. The end. And now, dear listener, it's your turn to rest. Close your eyes, snuggle up, and let the stars twinkle just for you. Tomorrow will be a wonderful day, perhaps even an adventure of your own. Good night, little dreamer. Sleep well. Snow White and the 7 Dwarfs, a classic fairy tale read by Beverly Chen. Welcome to Thimbleberry Stories, where warm and cozy tales await you. If you love gentle bedtime stories that make you feel safe and snug, like curling up by a crackling fire on a chilly night, be sure to like and subscribe so you never miss a new adventure. Now, get comfy, pull up your favorite blanket, and let's begin tonight's story. Once upon a time, in a quiet kingdom, nestled between rolling green hills and deep whispering forests, there lived a kind and gentle queen who longed for a child. One winter's day, as she sat at the window, Looking at the new fallen snow, she sighed and made a wish. "Oh, how I long for a child, one as bright as the morning frost, as full of life as the autumn berries, and as strong as the tallest tree in the forest." In time, their wish came true, and a little one was born. They named her Snow White. But joy turned to sorrow, for the queen did not live long after, and Snow White's remaining parent, the king, eventually remarried. The new queen was beautiful, but cold-hearted. She possessed a magic mirror, and each day she would ask, "Mirror, mirror on the wall, who's the fairest of them all?" For years the mirror replied, "You, my queen, are the fairest of them all." But as Snow White grew, her kindness and beauty shone even brighter, and one day the mirror answered, "Queen, you are lovely, it is true, but Snow White is fairer still than you." Fury kindled in the queen's heart. She called for the royal huntsman. "Take the child deep into the forest and see that she never returns." The huntsman led Snow White far into the woods, but as he raised his knife, his heart faltered. "Run, little one," he whispered. "Run and never return." Snow White fled deeper and deeper into the emerald tangle of the forest. Gnarled roots grasped at her feet, owls hooted, and the wind whispered secrets among the trees. At last, exhausted, she stumbled upon a tiny cottage with a cheerful thatched roof and a little wooden door, no taller than her shoulder. Inside, everything was small and tidy. 7 little chairs at a polished oak table, 7 neatly folded blankets at the end of 7 snug beds. She ate a few bites from each of the 7 bowls of porridge, then curled up in the largest of the tiny beds, drifting into dreams. At dusk, the owners of the cottage returned, 7 dwarfs with bright eyes. They gasped to find Snow White sleeping. "Who is this gentle visitor?" they whispered. When Snow White awoke, she told them her tale, and the dwarfs' kind hearts swelled with pity. "Stay with us," they said. "We'll keep you safe." So Snow White became their dear companion, sweeping the cottage, tending the fire, and filling their days with laughter. But far away, the queen still sought Snow White's fate. Once again, she stood before her mirror. "Mirror, mirror on the wall, who's the fairest of them all?" The mirror, bound to the truth, replied, "Queen, you are lovely, it is true, but Snow White, safe with the 7 dwarfs, is fairer still than you." Fury boiled within the queen. She brewed a wicked plan and disguised herself as an old peddler. With a basket of silk ribbons, she journeyed to the cottage and knocked upon the door. "Sweet child, let me lace your dress with the finest ribbon." Snow White, trusting and gentle, let the old woman tighten the corset laces, but the queen pulled them too tight until Snow White could not breathe and fell as if lifeless. The queen fled, believing she had won. That evening, the dwarves returned and found Snow White pale and still. In horror, they cut the laces, and breath returned to her lips. She told the dwarves of the old peddler woman. The dwarves warned her never to open the door to a stranger. But the queen was relentless. She returned, this time with a poisoned comb. "Child, let me smooth your lovely hair." But the moment the comb touched her head, Snow White collapsed. Once more the dwarves saved her, and once more they warned her to beware. For the 3rd and final time, the queen disguised herself, this time as a kindly old apple seller. She knocked on the cottage door. "Dear child, taste this apple, the sweetest in all the land." The apple gleamed red as a winterberry, and when Snow White took a bite, she fell into a deep, death-like sleep. The dwarfs could not wake her. With heavy hearts, they built a glass coffin and laid her beneath a forest canopy, where woodland creatures kept watch and the seasons passed around her. One day, a prince riding through the woods saw the sleeping figure and was enchanted. "I cannot leave her here," he declared. "Let me take her to my kingdom, where she may rest in honor." As his attendants lifted the glass coffin, the motion dislodged the poisoned apple from her throat. Snow White gasped, her eyes fluttered open, and life returned to her. The prince knelt beside her. "You have been asleep for a long time," he said gently. Snow White smiled. "I believe I have." He asked her for her hand in marriage, and with the blessings of the 7 dwarfs, they journeyed to his kingdom. As for the wicked queen, she returned to her mirror once more and asked, "Mirror, mirror on the wall, who is the fairest of them all?" The mirror answered, "Queen, you are lovely, it is true, but Snow White, who lives in joy and love, is fairer still than you." The queen's fury consumed her, and she was never seen again. As for Snow White and her prince, they lived in a castle of warmth and laughter, but they never forgot the kindness of the 7 dwarfs or the lessons of the deep whispering woods. And in the evenings, when the stars gleamed like diamonds, they would sit by the fire and tell stories of apples and ribbons, of kindness and caution, and of a love that broke the spell of sleep. And so, they lived happily ever after. The end. And now, dear dreamer, it's your turn to rest. Close your eyes, snuggle up, and let the stars twinkle just for you. Tomorrow will be a wonderful day, perhaps even an adventure of your own. Good night, little dreamer. Sleep well. Jack and the Beanstalk. Illustrations by Chris Anderson. Read by Beverly Chen. Welcome to Thimbleberry Stories, where warm and cozy tales await you. If you love classic fairy tales with a touch of magic and adventure, be sure to like and subscribe so you never miss a new journey into the world of storytelling. Now, get comfy, pull up your favorite blanket, and let's begin tonight's tale. Once upon a time, in a small village, there lived a boy named Jack. He and his mother were very poor, with only one thing of value, a cow named Daisy, who gave them milk to sell. One day, Daisy stopped giving milk, and Jack's mother sighed. "Jack, we have no choice but to sell her at the market." Jack was sad, but agreed. He set off early the next morning, leading Daisy down the winding village path. Before he got far, he met an old man with twinkling eyes and a long silver beard. "Good morning, young man," the old man said. "Where are you taking that fine cow?" "To market, sir," Jack replied. The old man stroked his beard. "I have a better trade for you," he said, holding out a few small beans. "These are magic beans. If you plant them tonight, by morning they'll grow as high as the clouds." Jack's eyes widened. "Magic beans!" "Indeed," the man said. "They're worth far more than a cow." Jack hesitated, but then thought, surely magic beans are more exciting than selling Daisy for coins. So he handed over the cow, took the beans, and ran home. When Jack's mother saw the beans, she gasped, "Jack, what have you done? We needed money for food, not useless beans." In frustration, she tossed them out of the window. That night, Jack went to bed feeling foolish. But when he awoke the next morning, something astonishing had happened. A giant beanstalk stretched from the ground up into the sky, disappearing into the clouds. Without hesitation, Jack climbed the beanstalk. He climbed higher and higher until he reached the top, where he found a strange land above the clouds. In the distance, there stood a magnificent castle. Jack tiptoed closer, curiosity bubbling inside him. At the castle's great door, he knocked timidly. A giantess with kind but weary eyes opened it. "What are you doing here, boy?" she asked. Jack gulped. "I'm just exploring." "You must leave before my husband comes," she warned. "He is a terrible giant who eats little boys." But before Jack could leave, the ground trembled. Boom, boom, boom. The giantess gasped. "Quick, hide!" Jack darted into the cupboard just as a monstrous giant stomped into the room. His voice thundered. "Fee, fi, fo, fum, I smell the blood of an Englishman." "Nonsense," the giantess said, nervously stirring a pot. "There's no one here. Sit and eat." The giant sat down, gobbling his meal, then called, "Bring me my gold." His wife fetched a sack of gold coins, and as the giant counted them, his heavy eyelids drooped. Soon, he was snoring loudly. Jack crept from his hiding spot, grabbed a handful of gold coins, and ran as fast as he could to the beanstalk. He slid down and showed his mother the gold. "We won't be hungry anymore, Mother." Days passed, but Jack's curiosity got the best of him. One morning, he climbed the beanstalk again. This time, the giantess hesitated, but let him in. "Be careful," she warned. Once again, the ground shook. Boom, boom, boom. "Fee, fi, fo, fum, I smell the blood of an Englishman." "Don't be silly," his wife said. "You're imagining things." The giant ate his meal, then called, "Bring me my goose that lays golden eggs." Jack's eyes widened as the giantess placed a small, feathery goose on the table. "Lay!" the giant ordered, and to Jack's amazement, the goose laid a golden egg. Before long, the giant fell asleep, and Jack tiptoed forward, scooped up the goose, and dashed down the beanstalk. "Mother," he said when he got home, "look, this goose lays golden eggs." Jack's mother could hardly believe it. They would never be poor again. But Jack wasn't finished. Days later, he climbed the beanstalk one last time. He hid as the giant roared, "Fee, fi, fo, fum." But soon, the giant fell asleep. Jack spotted a golden harp sitting by the giant's chair. As he reached for it, the harp suddenly sang out, "Master, Master, someone is taking me." The giant awoke with a terrible roar. Jack grabbed the harp and ran. The ground shook as the giant chased him. Jack reached the beanstalk and scrambled down as fast as he could, the giant close behind. "Mother!" Jack yelled. "Bring the axe!" Jack's mother ran outside with an axe, and as soon as Jack touched the ground, he swung with all his might. Chop! Chop! With a final blow, the beanstalk snapped, and the giant tumbled down, crashing into the earth with a mighty thud. He lay still, never to rise again. Jack hugged his mother. "We're safe now," he said. With the goose's golden eggs and the magic harp, they never had to worry about money again. And from that day forward, Jack and his mother lived happily ever after. The end. And now, dear listener, it's your turn to rest. Close your eyes, snuggle up, and let the stars twinkle just for you. Tomorrow will be a wonderful day, perhaps even an adventure of your own. Good night, little dreamer. Sleep well. Stone Soup, a classic fairy tale, read by Beverly Chen. Welcome to Thimbleberry Stories, where warm and cozy tales await you. If you love gentle bedtime stories that make you feel warm and cozy like a bowl of soup, be sure to like and subscribe so you never miss a new adventure. Now, get comfy, pull up your favorite blanket, and let's begin tonight's story. Once upon a time, nestled between rolling emerald hills, a wide lazy river, and the whispering embrace of the Thimblewood forest, there lay a small village called Thimbleberry Village. It was a charming place of winding cobblestone streets, timber-framed cottages with thatched roofs, and gardens brimming with berry bushes and herbs. But despite its beauty, the village had grown cold, not in weather, but in spirit. The villagers had once been known for their warmth and generosity, but hard times had come. A bitter winter had drained their food stores, a poor harvest had left their larders empty, and one by one they began keeping to themselves, afraid to share what little they had left. Doors stayed shut, windows were drawn, and laughter became a rare sound in the streets. One chilly autumn evening, as golden leaves tumbled in the breeze and the scent of wood smoke curled through the air, 3 weary travelers arrived at the village gates. They were clad in faded cloaks, their boots worn from miles of walking, and their faces carried the dust of a long journey. The leader of the 3, a tall man with kind eyes, stepped forward and knocked on the nearest cottage door. "Good evening, kind folk," he said, his voice warm despite his weariness. "We have traveled far and seek shelter for the night. Could you spare a bit of food?" The door opened just a crack, revealing a woman wrapped tightly in a woolen shawl. She looked at the travelers with suspicion. "Food is scarce," she said warily. "We barely have enough for ourselves." She closed the door, the sound of the latch clicking firmly in place. The travelers moved from house to house, knocking on doors, speaking kindly, but each time the villagers turned them away with the same excuse. Some simply shook their heads. Others hurriedly shut their shutters. Even the village baker, whose warm loaves could be smelled from the street, insisted he had nothing to spare. The travelers huddled in the village square, exchanging knowing glances. Then the tallest of them clapped his hands together and said loudly, "Well, if there is no food to be shared, then we must make our own. We shall make stone soup." A few villagers peeked out from their windows, frowning in confusion. Stone soup? What nonsense was this? The travelers set to work. One found a large, empty iron cauldron near the well and set it over a fire, sending up a plume of steam into the cool evening air. Another filled the pot with water from the well, while the third rummaged in his satchel, and pulled out 3 smooth, round stones. With great ceremony, he dropped them into the bubbling water. By now, the villagers had crept closer, their curiosity piqued. Surely this was a trick. How could one make soup from stones? The tall traveler took a deep breath, inhaling the steam as if it were the finest of aromas. "Ah, this will be a wonderful soup," he declared. "But you know, a bit of salt and pepper would truly bring out the flavor." "I suppose I could spare a pinch," muttered the grocer's wife, disappearing into her house. She returned moments later with salt and pepper, which the travelers stirred into the pot. "Yes, that's much better," the second traveler agreed, tasting the broth. "Of course, an onion or 2 would make it even better." A young boy, no older than 10, hesitated before stepping forward. He clutched a small golden onion in his hands. "I have this," he said shyly. The traveler smiled and added it to the pot. One by one, the villagers began to contribute. A farmer brought a handful of carrots. A fisherman hesitated before tossing in a few small fish. The baker, once reluctant, stepped forward with a bundle of fresh herbs, his hands lingering over the leaves as he let them go. The blacksmith's wife added potatoes. Another villager brought a plump head of cabbage. And soon, someone contributed a piece of smoked sausage. The cauldron, once filled with nothing but water and stones, now bubbled with rich, fragrant broth, steam curling into the crisp evening air. The villagers watched, their eyes wide with wonder. They had thought they had nothing, but together, they had everything. At last, the soup was ready. The travelers ladled it into wooden bowls, and the villagers gathered beneath the lantern-lit trees, huddling together on benches and low stone walls. They ate, laughed, and spoke of things they had long kept locked away, memories of festivals, old friendships, the times before fear had closed their hearts. The warmth of the soup filled their bellies, but the warmth of their kindness filled something even deeper. As the night deepened, the oldest traveler stood and said, "We must be on our way. But remember this night, dear friends. Hunger is not just the emptiness of the stomach, it is the emptiness of the heart. But when we share, there is always enough." The villagers nodded, their hearts light, their spirits filled. They had spent too long in isolation, believing they had nothing, when in truth, they had everything they needed all along: each other. As the travelers disappeared down the moonlit road, the people of Thimbleberry village stood together in the square, promising never to let fear and mistrust divide them again. And from that day forward, there was never hunger in Thimbleberry village again. The end. And now, dear listener, it's your turn to rest. Close your eyes, snuggle up, and let the stars twinkle just for you. Tomorrow will be a wonderful day, perhaps even an adventure of your own. Good night, little dreamer. Sleep well. Little Red Riding Hood, a classic fairy tale. Read by Beverly Chen. Welcome to Thimbleberry Stories, where warm and cozy tales await you. If you love gentle bedtime stories that make you feel as warm and cozy as visiting Grandma, be sure to like and subscribe so you never miss a new adventure. Now, get comfy, pull up your favorite blanket, and let's begin tonight's story. Once upon a time, in a quiet little village near the edge of a great forest, there lived a sweet and kind-hearted girl. She was loved by everyone, but no one adored her more than her grandmother. One day, her grandmother sewed her a beautiful red cloak with a hood, and the girl loved it so much that she wore it everywhere. Soon, everyone called her Little Red Riding Hood. One bright morning, Little Red Riding Hood's mother packed a basket with fresh bread, sweet butter, and a jar of honey. "Your grandmother is feeling ill," her mother said. "Take this basket to her and keep her company. But remember, stay on the path, don't talk to strangers, and go straight to grandmother's house." "I promise, Mother," Little Red Riding Hood said cheerfully. She put on her red cloak, picked up the basket, and set off through the forest. The forest was bright and full of birdsong. Sunlight dappled the path, and flowers swayed gently in the breeze. As she walked, Little Red Riding Hood saw a patch of the most beautiful wildflowers she had ever seen. "Grandmother would love these," she thought. She stepped off the path and began to pick a small bouquet. Just then, a deep, smooth voice interrupted her thoughts. "Good morning, little girl," said the voice. Startled, Little Red Riding Hood turned to see a large gray wolf standing among the trees. He had golden eyes and a sly smile, but his voice was friendly. "Good morning, Mr. Wolf," she replied politely. "And where might such a sweet little girl be going on this fine day?" the wolf asked, tilting his head. "To my grandmother's house," she answered, "to bring her some food because she's not feeling well." The wolf's ears perked up. "How kind of you! And where does your dear grandmother live?" Little Red Riding Hood, thinking nothing of it, pointed down the path. "At the end of this road, just beyond the 3 large oak trees." The wolf smiled wider, revealing his sharp teeth. "What a good granddaughter you are. I won't keep you. Do enjoy your walk." With that, he trotted away, disappearing into the woods. But the wolf was not simply going on his way. He had a plan. Taking a shortcut through the trees, he ran as fast as he could, reaching grandmother's cottage far ahead of Little Red Riding Hood. He knocked gently on the door. "Who is it?" called grandmother from her bed. "It's me, grandmother," the wolf answered in a high, sweet voice, trying to sound like Little Red Riding Hood. "I've brought you some food and flowers." "Oh, how lovely! Come in, dear," grandmother said. The wolf pushed open the door and leaped inside. Grandmother gasped, but before she could cry out, the wolf grabbed a long scarf from a chair and tied her up tightly. He carried her over to the closet and placed her inside. "There now," he chuckled. "Rest for a while, grandmother. I have a visitor to surprise." Then he put on her soft nightcap and her nightgown, climbed into bed, and pulled the covers up to his chin. Not long after, Little Red Riding Hood arrived at the cottage, humming a tune and holding her basket of food and flowers. She knocked on the door. "Who is it?" came a hoarse voice from inside. "It's me, grandmother. I've brought you some treats and flowers." "Come in, dear," the voice rasped. Little Red Riding Hood stepped inside and found her grandmother in bed, looking very strange. The room was dim, and the wolf had pulled the covers up high. Little Red Riding Hood hesitated. Something was very wrong. "Oh, grandmother," she said slowly, "what big ears you have." "The better to hear you with, my dear," said the wolf. "Oh, grandmother, what big eyes you have." "The better to see you with, my dear." "Oh, grandmother, what big hands you have." "The better to hug you with, my dear." She took a step closer. "Oh, grandmother," she whispered, "what big teeth you have." "The better to eat you with, my dear," the wolf roared, throwing back the covers and leaping out of bed. Little Red Riding Hood screamed and ran toward the door, but at that very moment, a loud knock sounded outside. Bang, bang, bang! It was the woodcutter from the village. He had been passing by and heard the wolf's terrible voice. Bursting through the door, he saw the wolf lunging at Little Red Riding Hood. With one great swing of his axe, the woodcutter frightened the wolf, who let out a howl and sped out of the house, disappearing deep into the forest, never to be seen again. Little Red Riding Hood, still shaking, looked around. "Where's grandmother?" From inside the closet, a faint voice called, "I'm in here." Little Red Riding Hood rushed over and flung open the door. There was grandmother, a little shaken, but unharmed. Little Red Riding Hood untied her, and Grandma stepped out, hugging her granddaughter tightly. "Oh, my dear girl, what an adventure we've had." That evening, as they sat together with the woodcutter, with warm tea and sweet bread, Grandmother said, "Remember, my dear, always listen to your mother's advice. The woods are lovely, but not everyone in them is a friend." "I promise," said Little Red Riding Hood. And from that day on, she never strayed from the path again. The end. And now, dear listener, it's your turn to rest. Close your eyes, snuggle up, and let the stars twinkle just for you. Tomorrow will be a wonderful day, perhaps even an adventure of your own. Good night, little dreamer. Sleep well. If you enjoyed this classic fairy tale, please like and subscribe. It really helps our channel. Thank you so much. Puss in Boots, read by Beverly Chen. Welcome to Thimbleberry Stories, where warm and cozy tales await you. If you love gentle bedtime stories that wrap around you like a soft, well-worn cloak on a crisp autumn evening, be sure to like and subscribe so you never miss a new adventure. Now, get comfy, pull up your favorite blanket, and let's begin tonight's story. Once upon a time, in a small village, there lived a poor miller who had 3 sons. When the miller passed away, he left his eldest son the mill, his middle son the donkey, and to his youngest son, he left only a cat. The youngest son, named Tom, sighed as he looked at his inheritance. "What use is a cat? My brothers can work and earn their living, but I have nothing." The cat, who was quite an extraordinary creature, stretched and spoke. "Do not worry, master. Just give me a bag and a pair of fine boots, and you shall see that I am not just any ordinary cat." Tom, though surprised to hear his cat speak, trusted him and used his last few coins to buy the boots and a small bag. The cat, now looking quite dashing in his fine leather boots, slung the bag over his shoulder and set off toward the fields. Puss in Boots had a plan. He went to a nearby meadow where he knew the king's carriage would soon pass. Using his quick thinking, he caught a plump rabbit and placed it in the bag. Then he made his way to the grand palace and bowed before the king. "Your Majesty," he said grandly, "I bring you a gift from my noble master, the Marquis of Carabas," for that was the impressive title he had invented for his master. The king, delighted by the gift, thanked Puss in Boots and accepted the rabbit. For the next few weeks, Puss continued bringing gifts: partridges, pheasants, and fat quail, all presented as gifts from the mysterious and generous Marquis of Carabas. The king became quite curious about this nobleman. One day, Puss learned that the king and his beautiful daughter, the princess, were traveling by carriage along the riverbank. Rushing home, Puss said to Tom, "Master, do exactly as I say. Remove your old clothes and step into the river." Tom hesitated, but trusted his clever cat and waded into the water. Just as the carriage passed by, Puss ran into the road, waving his paws wildly. "Help! Help! My master, the Marquis of Carabas, has been robbed. His fine clothes were stolen while he was bathing in the river." The king immediately ordered his guards to fetch elegant clothes for Tom. Once dressed, Tom looked quite handsome, so much so that the princess blushed when she saw him. The king, pleased with such a well-mannered young man, invited Tom into the royal carriage. Puss, thrilled that his plan was working, raced ahead toward a great castle. As Puss in Boots ran ahead of the carriage, he spotted a group of farmers working in a golden wheat field. He paused and called out, "Listen closely. When the king's carriage passes, he will ask whose land this is. You must tell him that it belongs to the great Marquis of Carabas. If you do, you will be rewarded." The farmers, unsure but eager for a reward, nodded and agreed. Sure enough, when the king's carriage rolled past, he admired the vast golden fields and asked, "Who owns this land?" The farmers, just as Puss had instructed, replied, "Why, your majesty, this land belongs to the noble Marquis of Carabas." The king, further impressed, turned to Tom with a pleased smile. "You truly are a wealthy and powerful nobleman, my dear Marquis. I had no idea your land stretched so far." Tom, surprised but clever enough to play along, smiled humbly. The princess looked at him with even more admiration. Puss, satisfied that his trick was working, ran ahead once more, this time to the great castle. Now, this castle belonged to a fearsome, greedy ogre who owned all the land around it. But Puss had one last clever trick up his sleeve. Arriving at the castle, Puss knocked confidently on the enormous door. When the ogre opened it, Puss bowed deeply. "Oh, great and powerful ogre," he purred, "I have heard you have amazing magic. They say you can turn into any creature you desire." The ogre grinned, proud of his abilities. "Indeed I can." "Can you turn into a mighty lion?" Puss challenged. "Of course!" the ogre roared, and in a puff of smoke transformed into a great lion, shaking the ground with his mighty roar. Puss, pretending to be frightened, scampered away. "Oh, magnificent! But surely someone as powerful as you could also turn into something as tiny as a mouse?" The ogre, wanting to impress the little cat further, scoffed. "Easily." With another flash, he shrank into a tiny mouse and scurried across the floor. Quick as lightning, Puss pounced, snap, and swallowed the mouse whole. The ogre was no more. When the king's carriage arrived at the castle, Puss ran out to greet them. "Welcome, your majesty, to the castle of my master, the Marquis of Carabas." The king was astonished at such a grand estate, and was even more impressed with the young Marquis. The princess, who had grown quite fond of Tom during their ride, smiled shyly at him. Seeing how clever and charming he was, the king declared,
Such a nobleman would make a fine husband for my daughter."
And so Tom married the princess, and they lived happily in the grand castle. Puss in Boots became the most honored and beloved cat in the land, never having to chase mice again, unless he wanted to for fun. And from that day on, whenever someone saw a cat with particularly fine boots, they would always wonder, could it be the clever Puss in Boots? The end. And now, dear listener, it's your turn to rest. Close your eyes, snuggle up, let the stars twinkle just for you. Tomorrow will be a wonderful day, perhaps even an adventure of your own. Good night, little dreamer. Sleep well. If you enjoyed this story, please like and subscribe. It really helps our channel.